President Biden traveled to Minnesota Tuesday to highlight aspects of his $1 trillion infrastructure plan. The president toured Dakota County Technical College in Rosemount. The White House said the school will help to train Americans to build and maintain the infrastructure supported in the president's package. Mr. Biden's trip comes as concerns over the new COVID strain, rising inflation, and issues with the nation's supply chain threaten to derail his overall economic agenda. CBS News senior White House correspondent, my booth buddy, Weijia Jiang, joins me now for more from the White House. Weijia, good to see you. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell testified earlier today before the Senate Banking Committee and acknowledged the inflation we're seeing will likely now continue into next year, possibly as deep as the third quarter. Curious how the White House is responding to all this, and what are the options for the Biden administration at this point to combat rising prices?
Well, the White House hasn't responded directly to Powell's testimony today, but certainly in the past several weeks, they have made their message clear, and that is President Biden is doing whatever he can and everything he can to try to curb these rising prices. That's exactly why he went to Minnesota again today to promote the new infrastructure law, because the White House is banking on the impact of that to really help ease some of the supply chain issues that are driving up prices. He's also worked to try to make it more beneficial for people to sign up for trucking as a career. He's working on that. And he has worked with ports, especially those out west, to try to get things moving along, helping, for example, to implement some fines. But those things like getting people to want to be a trucker and clearing the ports, with some measures included in that bill we just talked about, law, I should say, those things are not always in his control, right? He can only do so much, which is why the White House has always said from the beginning that this is really a private sector issue when it comes to easing that congestion that's driving up the prices. And so even though the administration is taking steps, even though the president continues to work on his economic agenda, the reality is there are some things that they'll just have to wait to see how they play out. And so clearly there is a frustration. The president has acknowledged that this is a tough time for Americans, but he is hoping that people ride this wave with him and try to support the rest of his economic agenda, which he says will make even more of a difference.
Yeah, it's a totally fair point on how it's out of his control because he doesn't control the private sector, nor should he. But on Wednesday, the president is set to update the country on how the White House is working to fix those supply chain bottlenecks. Yeah. Do we have any more sense of what we can expect him to say?
Well, we know that he just met with the CEOs of several big companies like Food Lion and Etsy ahead of the holiday shopping season. And the message is probably going to be a lot of like what White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki has already said, which is that the shelves are going to be stocked and the toys are going to be there and the food is going to be there, and that Americans should not panic about the fact that, you know, they might not be able to get their hands on things that they want, even though there is a crunch, because the president sat down with the CEOs. And actually the reason why he's making comments tomorrow rather than yesterday when they were scheduled is because the White House says he wanted even more time to listen to their concerns and to listen to some of the solutions that they are coming up with to ease those bottlenecks. But I think he's going to try to strike an optimistic tone, Ed, and reassure people that those companies are working in tandem with the administration to try to make sure people have what they need for the holidays.
In fact, I think some of us realize that part of the reason he wanted to have a longer meeting, and some aides conceded this, is because he hasn't been able to actually meet in person with a lot of these CEOs at the White House over the course of this year. They've been virtual meetings. So the fact that they came in person was part of why apparently he wanted to spend more time with them.
That's right. You know, the president, he loves that FaceTime with people. He, you know, oftentimes stays a lot longer at events than scheduled because he gets to have that interaction that he so craves.
Yeah, grip and grin time for sure. Eats up a lot of his schedule. He and his team have also called for calm as scientists work to learn more about the Omicron variant. Mr. Biden also said lockdowns aren't on the table right now. Do we know what the factors are behind that decision?
Well, when you look at the last time we did have lockdowns, right, that was in the very early stages of the pandemic. And so administration officials and the doctors on board want to stress to Americans that we are not in that same place. Even though there are so many unknowns with the Omicron variant, their message is that we are not starting from ground zero for a variety of reasons. Number one, because many Americans, even though not as many as they would like, are fully vaccinated, and many are also getting their booster shots. Dr. Fauci also says that he believes, even though he doesn't know the percentage of effectiveness for these vaccines, he does believe that what we currently have will offer some layer of protection against Omicron. And they also point to the fact that there are CDC regulations and guidelines in place. For example, if you're gathering indoors in a large crowd, you're supposed to still wear a mask. And so because they've already studied this virus for so long, they are confident in moving forward without having to shut things down, at least for now, as they wait to get more details about this new strain, which we should have in about 2 to 3 weeks based on their timeline. But they are trying, as you mentioned, Ed, to project calm and try to tell people not to panic at this moment, because that doesn't do any good.
And it's going to be fascinating to watch them try to maintain that sense of calm as we await the conclusions of scientists in the next few weeks. I just don't understand how they program that or try to maintain that sense of calm. It's going to be a real challenge for them. Meanwhile, the Congressional Budget Office projects the federal government could run out of money before the end of December if the debt limit remains unchanged. That echoes comments from the Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen, who said the U.S. is at risk of hitting the limit by December 15th. How confident is the White House and the president that the debt ceiling actually can be addressed before that date?
Well, Ed, as you know very well, it doesn't really matter how confident they are. It matters what Congress is going to do or not do. And right now, you know, unless Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer decides to go down a very long path to try to use reconciliation to do this, it doesn't look like they have the votes, at least not today, because they'll have to have at least 10 Republicans on board to move ahead with this, with the steps they need to take to extend the debt ceiling. And they've already made pretty clear that they're not going to support that. However, I think the White House is encouraged by the fact that Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell has seemed to tamp down some of the heated rhetoric that we heard from him and other Republicans when they were already going to bat over this, when they passed a short-term measure back in October. In fact, McConnell has said that they are working together, that they are trying to reach a deal and see how they can avoid, not being able to pay the country's debts. It's just that so far they haven't gotten there. And so I think the president would express confidence and say that he's behind the scenes trying to get this done. But, it doesn't really matter what he and the White House want to do. It matters what they can convince lawmakers to up on the Hill.
Yeah, and we'll see how that goes. We should point out, if you're curious, over Weijia's shoulder, that is a large red AIDS ribbon hanging on the front of the White House to mark World AIDS Day tomorrow. And, of course, they've hung the Christmas wreaths as well there on the windows. But I was mostly focused on what Weijia had to say, and I appreciate you joining us tonight, Weijia.
Thanks, Ed. Always great to be with you.
Take care.